1977, San Aurelio. A pastor and his young daughter vanished during a pilgrimage up Peña Santa Mountain. Only 2 colleagues return, claiming a landslide caused the accident. No one questions it. No one investigates. 27 years later, at the base of a dead ceiba tree, a rotted cloth bag is found. Inside are a Bible, a pastor's robe, and a doll identical to the one returned years ago, but perfectly intact. How can an object exist in 2 places at once? This story begins with a farewell and ends where secrets refuse to stay buried. 2004, San Aurelio. A cold wind sweeps in early, stripping the last leaves from the trees in front of 12 Santa Gertrudis Street. The house has been silent for 27 years. Since Father Miguel Serrano Pastor of Santa Marta Parish disappeared with his young daughter Lucia on Peña Santa Mountain, his wife, Maria, has not attended Mass. She lives a reclusive life, rarely speaking to neighbors, receiving no visitors, and only opening her door for essential deliveries. That morning, at 6:15 a.m., Maria opened her door as usual for milk and bread. But beside the familiar wooden tray was an unfamiliar parcel. Small, wrapped in brown paper, with no stamps or sender's name, only a handwritten note. Mrs. Serrano, open only when alone. Maria carried the parcel inside. She didn't rush to open it. Placing it on the wooden table by the window, she walked around the house, checking every lock, every crack. The kitchen window, the backyard gate lock, even the inside bolt on the main door, all were meticulously inspected. A ritual. Only when she was certain no one was watching did she return to the table. The parcel lay there, not heavy, yet seemingly filling the entire room with its presence. She pulled up a chair and sat, holding her breath for a few seconds before slowly exhaling. Her fingertips trembled slightly as she peeled back the paper wrapper. Inside were 3 items: a hand-drawn, yellowed map with Peña Santa Mountain marked. Notably, a small side path branched off the traditional pilgrimage Route 1 not found on any official map ever published. A small piece of paper with simple handwriting slanted to the right. Miguel wasn't silent. You must find him. And finally, not paper, but another piece of news. Not inside the parcel. That same morning, the Sierra del Cielo Forest Police called her home. An officer named Gabriel said, "We just found a strange cloth bag buried under a dead ceiba tree in the national park. There are a few items that seem to be related to your husband, Mrs. Serrano." She asked them to wait 30 minutes, her hands trembling and her eyes deep. What on earth is happening today? As soon as she hung up, she stood. Her hands shook slightly as she buttoned her coat, not bothering with a scarf. For 27 years, peace. As if everything had ended, then suddenly, in one day it all came rushing back. The map, the note, the cloth bag, and now the call from the police. She slipped on her old shoes, the kind she wore to the cemetery, then checked her purse out of habit. Wallet, keys, Miguel's notebook. It took only a few minutes, but her heart urged her on as if every second counted. Stepping out, Maria locked the gate so quickly her hand almost slipped from the knob. The early autumn wind gusted through her hair, cold but not biting, enough to make her tighten her coat and hurry toward the car waiting on the street. At the scene, Maria met Gabriel at the forest entrance. He led her along a rough dirt path, then turned right onto a less traveled trail. About 20 minutes later, they arrived at the base of a barren ceiba tree. Its trunk cracked and partially scorched, roots protruding from the ground. The cloth bag had been excavated from a depth of nearly half a meter. The outer fabric was almost completely rotted, But inside, 3 items remain preserved. A black pastor's robe with a small silver crucifix pinned to the collar. Inside, an embroidered name tag, Padre Miguel Serrano. An old Bible, its cover cracked, page edges slightly singed. The handwriting on the first page made Maria stand in silence for a long time. God sees everything. I cannot remain silent any longer. Finally, the item that nearly made Maria collapse. The Catalina doll. A toy she had personally resewn the head for Lucia in 1976. There was no mistaking it. Their daughter had never left home without it. Gabriel asked softly, "Would you like to take these items home, Mrs. Serrano?" Maria shook her head. "No," she replied, her voice hardening. "They are evidence. Please keep them safe." She stared intently at the handkerchief and the Catalina doll in the evidence bag. Her voice lowered, steady but clear. "My husband did not die in an accident. Someone chose how he would disappear." Then she turned to Carlos. "Don't let anyone bury this again." That afternoon, in her small, wood-lined attic room, Maria opened an iron cabinet and took out a chestnut wooden chest. Inside were letters, old photos, and Miguel's leather-bound journal. The first pages were brief mass schedules, donation notes. But towards the end, the handwriting became shaky, the lines tightly packed. "I cannot continue to close my eyes. They lie to the congregation and call it preserving faith. God sees all, and I have seen it too." The last page was smudged, the writing trembling. "If I do not return, know that I did not choose it." Maria closed the journal. She didn't cry, but her hand rested on the leather cover for a long time, as if listening to Miguel speak the part he hadn't had time to write. "You didn't leave, and neither will I." Immediately after Maria finished reading the last lines of Miguel's journal that afternoon, she quietly went downstairs, took an old envelope, and slipped the anonymous map and the note, "Miguel wasn't silent," inside. She left it on the kitchen table, locked the door, and walked straight to Santa Marta Church. For 27 years, this was her first time back. The church was still the same. The bell tower unchanged, the wooden doors slightly ajar, the lingering scent of burning candles. A group of parishioners were cleaning for the weekend, and everyone who saw Maria was startled. "Excuse me, can we help you? I want to see the person who keeps the parish records from 1977. They directed her to the upstairs archives. Maria slowly ascended the stone staircase. Each step was familiar. This was where her husband used to preach every Sunday. The archive room was small, with a wooden table and filing cabinets organized by year. She found the 1977 section, flipping through work logs, activity reports, and finally, the proposal for the Peña Santa Mountain pilgrimage. October 4th, 1977. Proposal. Private 3-day retreat, sacred journey avoiding the public. Participants: Miguel Serrano, leader, his daughter Lucia Serrano, 10 years old, Padre Tomas Peña, Padre Diego Alvarez. Approval: Bishop Raphael. Marginal note: approved. Journey in the spirit of personal dialogue with God. Maria closed the file. She remembered that morning vividly, Miguel wearing a light robe, carrying a small backpack, leading Lucia by the hand out the door. She had worried. "Miguel, she's so young. Peña Santa is not an easy mountain to climb. I will take her to meet God, not by ritual, but by sincerity," Do you need anyone else to go with you? No, just me, Lucia, and 2 people I trust. She had seen them off to the gate. Miguel went first, checking his backpack, his shoelaces. Lucia ran behind him, spinning her doll in her hand as she went. At the gate, the girl looked back, holding the Catalina doll high. Hasta luego, mamá. See you later, Mom. Maria smiled, waving back. But as the iron gate closed, her smile faded. She stood still for a moment, watching the shadows of father and daughter disappear down the cobblestone alley. A beat skipped in her chest. She didn't know why, only that her hand, resting on the door bolt, suddenly felt cold. A nameless, baseless feeling, yet clear, the kind of feeling only a wife and mother recognizes, when a loved one carries something away, unsure if they will bring it back. By the 4th day, the parish was abuzz. The pilgrimage was scheduled to end on the 3rd day, but none of the 4 had returned. The church phone went unanswered, and the monastery where Diego worked could not be reached. On the morning of the 5th day, all patience ran out, and the bishop called the police. The rescue team set out early that day. It took more than a day for the first discoveries to be made. Survivors had been found. Padre Tomas was found first, lying at the base of a broken tree. His right arm was broken, and he had an open head wound, unconscious. Not far away, Diego sat leaning against a rock, his eyes dazed, only able to whisper, "Landslide." Miguel and the girl fell. Couldn't save them. The police evacuated both from the mountain. A hurried report was filed that day. Serious terrain accident. 2 pastors survived. Father Miguel Serrano and young Lucia missing, not yet found. The community was heartbroken and mourned the unfortunate pastor and child. Peña Santa had many dangerous slopes. Sudden rain, landslides, accidents were not uncommon. Even Maria had no reason to doubt. Though her heart was empty, filled with extreme sorrow, she carried the torment of it for 27 years. If she had insisted on stopping her husband that day, perhaps everything would have been very different. At the hospital, Diego spoke while in a high fever. "We were praying. Miguel was in front, Lucia behind him." Then there was a cracking sound. The ground collapsed. He screamed for us to run. I turned back. Couldn't see them anymore. Tomas remained in a coma until the 10th day. And when he woke, he confirmed a similar story. I don't remember clearly. Everything collapsed very quickly. Diego pulled me up. No one had time to look back. On the 12th day, the church held a prayer service for Miguel and Lucia. Maria shed no tears. But when the rescue worker handed back Diego's backpack, she opened it and found the Catalina doll inside the toy Lucia never left without, now missing one hand. She said nothing, only took it home and placed it on the small altar in her living room. That night, for the first time in 10 exhausting days, she sat up in the middle of the night. Her body felt like it wanted to fold in on itself. But she didn't cry. She only breathed heavily, as if holding back a flood about to burst. No one in town knew that at that hour, a mother sat in the darkness, clutching an old toy, trying to keep herself from collapsing, fearing that if she fell, she wouldn't have the strength to get up and search for her child. Back to the present. On the 4th morning after the police returned the items found in the cloth bag at the base of the dead ceiba tree, Maria sat alone in the kitchen. On the table were 3 items: the pastor's robe, the Bible, and the Catalina doll carefully wrapped in tissue paper. Both hands intact, only a slight tangle at the top of its braided hair. Maria stared intently, not with emotion, but with suspicion. She stood up, went upstairs, and opened the third drawer of her oak cabinet. Inside, placed in a small wooden box, was the Catalina doll with a broken left hand, the item the rescue worker had returned in 1977. She placed the two dolls side by side. There was no mistaking it. The old doll, dusty and faded, with a broken left hand, the torn stitches Maria had personally mended years ago. The newly found doll, both hands intact, stitches a different color, clearly preserved for many years. This could not have happened if both Miguel and his daughter had died immediately in the landslide. Because if this doll was still intact, carefully wrapped and buried, it meant someone had survived and returned. Or someone had enough time to retrieve and store it after the accident occurred. Maria went to the nearest police station, bringing both dolls. The young officer who took the initial report listened carefully, then cautiously said, "I will make a note of this, but sometimes small items get lost in landslides. Animals might carry them off and leave them somewhere." Maria replied simply, "No animal knows how to fold a lining cloth and place a doll in a fabric bag. This was done by human hands, I am sure." The officer nodded slightly, wrote a few more lines in the file, but said nothing further. As he escorted her to the door, he only said, "We will look into it more carefully. If anything new comes up, we will contact you." Maria held no hope in that statement. She knew that tone exactly like 27 years ago. She didn't need more promises. She needed the truth. And if she had to go alone, she would. The next day, Maria returned to Santa Marta Church. She asked the manager to let her into Miguel's old office, now used as a storage room for old, unused items. It was covered in dust. She searched for the old drawer under the desk where her husband used to keep his private files. The drawer was stuck. Maria took a thin blade from her purse and gently pried it open. A soft click echoed. Inside was a stack of old A4 papers, clipped with a rusty clip. At the top was the heading, "Internal Budget, Q3, 1977. She skimmed through it. Amidst numerous small expenses, one line stood out, handwritten, "Private service, Peña Santa, 24,000 pesetas." Date signed, October 3rd, 1977, just one day before the pilgrimage group departed. Signed by P. Tomas Peña. But the signature looked strange. It didn't resemble Tomas's handwriting Maria had seen before. Carrying the file to the home of Carlos Jimenez, a retired police investigator from 1977, Maria placed the papers on the table. Carlos lived in a small house on the outskirts of San Aurelio, where the front garden always smelled of mint and a faint AM radio played all day. He was the type who disliked noise, rarely left home unless necessary, but still possessed a sharp memory from his time on the force. On the day of the disappearance, Carlos was the first to arrive at the scene at the base of the mountain. But afterward, the case file was withdrawn by higher authorities, and he was abruptly transferred, never to return to the case again. Maria knew that if anyone still held a piece of the truth from that year, it could only be him. Carlos read it all. His eyes lingered on the signature. "I believed them back then," he said slowly. "The report was very thorough. No tears, no holes. But looking back now, it seems there's more to the story." He opened a drawer, took out a magnifying glass, and examined the signature. A few minutes later, Carlos nodded slightly. "Not Tomas's handwriting. Someone signed for him." Maria asked softly, "If this signature is fake, does that mean someone prepared everything beforehand?" Carlos replied, "It means that accident might not have been an accident, a fraudulent event." In the last drawer of the dusty wooden cabinet, Carlos Jimenez pulled out a folded file box sealed with old wax. He opened the clasp, pulling out document after document. The 1977 Terrain Survey Report, preliminary interview transcripts, the mountain pilgrimage route diagram, and a stack of documents that were not transferred to the official file. One sheet among them made Maria pause. Pickup truck rental receipt, October 3, 1977. Renter's signature, Tomas Ibarra. Purpose: transport of liturgical equipment to Peña Santa. Maria looked at Carlos. "I never heard them mention bringing any equipment." Carlos nodded. "I also haven't seen any photos or heard any accounts of any equipment being brought along." "So if they weren't carrying equipment, what were they carrying?" They looked at each other for a few seconds. Carlos underlined the phrase liturgical equipment with a pencil. He said, "It's best to ask someone who worked closely with Miguel, someone who knows the inside story." Maria returned home, retrieved an old notebook containing the addresses of nuns and former church secretaries. She checked each name until she stopped at Sister Rosa, Santa Elena. Next to it was written, "Miguel's personal assistant from 1973 to 1977. 2 days later, Maria arrived at the Santa Elena nursing home. The home was nestled against low hills, quiet, with white walls and red tile roofs. Sister Rosa, now over 70, had weak eyes, but her voice was still clear. After Maria mentioned Miguel's name, she paused. She didn't ask, didn't deny, just nodded. The night before they left, Miguel called me into his office. He told me to recopy all the church's expenses for the past 3 months. I asked him why he needed it. Miguel just replied, "If I don't return, let this come to light." Rosa continued, "A week after he disappeared, Tomas came looking for me. He demanded all the copies back. I refused. The next day, I was asked to resign, without a reason. I didn't give the documents to anyone, and I didn't dare burn them either." She stood up, walked slowly to a small iron cabinet. After a few minutes of searching, she brought out an old file, tied with a gray cloth string, and handed it to Maria. Inside were detailed financial expenses from July to September 1977, personally copied by Rosa. A large sum of cash spent on supplies for unspecified purpose, with no accompanying invoice. A line, "Payment for trip protection," the recipient's name erased with black ink. The ink smudged as if intentionally hastily removed. At the end of the file was an additional transfer slip, handwritten, with small, hurried script. "Caution." Maria paused. She turned back to the last page of Miguel's journal. She compared the handwriting. No doubt. The handwritten phrase, "caution," was identical to Miguel Serrano's handwriting. Maria said softly, "Miguel knew what was going to happen. He left a trail." Carlos took the slip, examining it closely. If so, then everything that happened on the mountain that day wasn't accidental. It was prepared beforehand. Maria carefully flipped through each expense page, examining the smallest numbers. Each line was a layer of dust from the past, but some numbers kept repeating. 3,000, 3,000, 3,000. All were categorized under West Wing maintenance costs. She looked up. Carlos, is there a west wing of Santa Marta Cemetery that needs maintenance? Carlos frowned. No. That area has always been empty, never used. Maria quickly wrote down the expense items, marking them with a red pen. If there's nothing there, what was the money spent on? Carlos pondered, then reached for an old church map. He spread it out, using a ruler to trace the land west of the cemetery. A small corner had a symbol, X27. No name, no grave number, only small handwritten text next to it. Set aside, not registered in ledger. Carlos folded the map, speaking softly. Perhaps what Miguel intended to reveal wasn't just in the numbers, but also buried underground. Maria looked up, her voice calm. Then we will go, as soon as it's light. Carlos nodded, slowly standing up. I'll bring a shovel. The next morning, Maria returned to her desk with the file Rosa had given her the day before. In the financial details for September 1977, there was a line circled in red ink knot by Miguel, but by Rosa herself after copying it. Repair pastor's office floor, urgent, 200 pesetas, October 1st, 1977. It was a small expense, but in a situation where every trace was carefully hidden, such a small detail caught Maria's attention even more. She called Carlos. He came with local civil construction archives from the 1970s. After some searching, he pointed to a line. Interior construction contract, Santa Marta Church, hired carpenter, Luis Ortega. They now knew who they needed to find next. That afternoon, Maria and Carlos drove to the eastern edge of San Aurelio, where only a few old wooden houses remained, nestled in sparse woods. Luis Ortega, now over 80, lived alone. He opened the door when Maria knocked for the third time, frowning when the church was mentioned. That's old news. Nothing more to say. You can go home. Maria didn't argue. She simply pulled a copy of the expense receipt for pastor's office floor repair and a page from Miguel's journal where he wrote, they replaced the wood, but still couldn't cover their tracks. Luis glanced at the paper, then said nothing. He blinked once, very slowly, then sat down on a faded wooden chair on his porch. His breathing changed, not trembling exactly, but clearly no longer as calm as before. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice hoarse and low, as if just emerging from the earth. Maria didn't answer. Luis glanced at her, then nodded slightly. After a few more seconds, he continued. I remember. Let me tell you. They called me on the evening of October 1st. Said the pastor's office floor was termite-ridden, needed urgent repair. But when I arrived, the floor wasn't damaged at all. Still solid as a rock. Tomas and Diego were there. They wouldn't let me go anywhere outside the desk area. I saw them carrying a large black box, big enough for 2 people to carry, from the office down to the basement in the back. They locked the door right after. Luis stood up, went inside, then returned with an old yellowed hand-drawn blueprint with Santa Marta, Renovation Plan 10/1/1977 written in the bottom left corner. Maria looked closely. A small square in the office was noted in red ink. Cover indentation, seal with wood, leave no gaps. Carlos nodded. So something was hidden or cleaned up that night, right before they went up the mountain. Luis didn't answer. He just nodded once, as if confirming that it didn't need further explanation. Maria carefully folded the blueprint copy and the old expense sheets, putting them in her purse. Thank you, Luis. I know this isn't easy to talk about again. He shook his head. his eyes still fixed on a distant corner of the garden, where an unfinished wooden table sat from years ago. "Don't thank me. Just see it through. Because someone that year never came back." Maria nodded gently, then stood up, taking a step back. Before leaving the porch, she softly said, "I will find out. Not just for myself, but for him too." Luis didn't turn around, but his hand gripped the armrest of his chair tightly, long after she had left. Maria returned to Santa Marta Church the very next morning, asking to see the old pastor's office. The room was now used as a book storage room, but the floor layout remained the same. She compared Luis's blueprint with reality. Measuring the exact spot, she tapped lightly on the floor. One spot produced a duller thud than the rest. The location matched the covered area in the blueprint. Carlos knelt before the wooden floor, carefully using a pry bar to gently pry up the left edge, the exact spot indicated in Luis's blueprint. The wood panel came loose with a clack. Beneath it was a thin gray concrete base with a long crack running across it. Maria shined her flashlight, her heart pounding. They used a hand chisel, little by little, breaking through the covering. Beneath was only dry earth. Carlos stuck the small shovel down, digging a few dozen centimeters. Nothing except a dark, rotted piece of wood covered in dust and debris. Maria picked it up. The wood had no writing, no marks. They looked at each other in silence. No one spoke, but both were disappointed. Carlos placed the piece of wood aside, sighing softly. Maybe someone came back, took what was hidden here. Maria still gazed at the empty ground. Then she looked up slowly. No. Miguel marked it, which means he wanted someone to find it. Carlos picked up the shovel, plunging it firmly into the earth once more. Then, we dig deeper. 3 weeks after the rotted cloth bag was excavated from the roots of the dead ceiba tree, the Oviedo Provincial Forensic Identification Center called Carlos Jimenez. He said nothing to Maria until he had the official results. That morning, they went together to the provincial police headquarters. The technician presented a small evidence bag, sealed with red tape. Inside was a piece of ivory linen handkerchief, folded into 4, hidden deep at the bottom of the cloth bag. No one had discovered it during the initial inspection. The technician spoke slowly. Linen fabric, small size, with old dried blood stains. The decomposition level is consistent with a time frame of 25 to 30 years ago. Carlos nodded. What do the DNA results say? Matches Lucia Serrano. Maria went numb. The room suddenly seemed to shrink around her. No sound, no clear light, only a dense silence that enveloped her chest. She gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Her eyes remained fixed on the piece of paper where Miguel's handwritten note lay, as clear as if it had just been written that morning. It felt as if someone had just yanked back the curtain that had hidden her memories for 27 years. She didn't cry, but her breathing began to shorten. Her throat felt dry and raw. Her heart beat irregularly. That small handkerchief, she herself had folded it and placed it in Lucia's coat pocket that morning they left home. Her daughter had still been sleepy, sitting and eating bread with jam, clutching her Catalina doll as she ate. Will you remember to bring your handkerchief? Yes, Mama. Carlos sat down at the table, spreading out a map of Ouachita National Forest. He used a pen to mark the location where the ceiba tree was found. Deep within a rarely visited part of the forest, not near any main climbing routes. If the accident happened on the slopes of Peña Santa, he said. "Then this bag couldn't have fallen all the way here. This is a completely different location." "Then there's only one possibility," Maria replied. "Someone survived, brought the bag back from the scene, and then carefully buried it years later." Carlos pondered. He retrieved the 1977 pilgrimage file, which contained a copy of the pilgrimage route saved by Santa Marta Church. The route was clearly marked. Day 1, arrive at the base of the mountain. Day 2, camp near Agua Viva Stream. Day 3, ascend the peak via the west slope. Day 4, perform rites, rest, return. No route passed through the rock crevice behind the mountain where the anonymous map was marked. Carlos compared the church map with the hand-drawn map Maria had received in the parcel, and then he saw it. "Here it is, X." The X mark on the anonymous map was precisely in the narrow rock crevice on the northeast slope of Peña Santa Place. No rescue team had ever accessed due to its rugged terrain and lack of trails. Carlos pointed. If Miguel and Lucia fell down this side, no one could have found them. And if someone ever returned, only they would know how to get in. Maria didn't answer immediately. She folded the map, putting it in her bag. That evening, back home, Maria reopened the returned cloth bag. She turned over each item. Miguel's Bible, the now faded Catalina doll, the pastor's robe still with dust stains. She opened the Bible. On the first page was the familiar handwriting. "God sees everything. I cannot remain silent any longer." Maria closed her eyes. In her mind, only 2 images remained: the blood-stained handkerchief and the words, "Caution," in Miguel's identical handwriting. Carlos looked at her, his voice steady. "If this is a sign of atonement, then someone wants you to know where Miguel truly lies." Maria nodded softly. "I will go up the mountain, whether that person wants me to or not." Carlos quickly completed special legal procedures with the Asturias regional government. He hired a group of 3 local guides who had previously worked for Peña Santa Mountain Rescue Survey the Southwest Range, which had never been searched since 1977. The original Santa Marta Church map had no side branches, but the anonymous map Maria received in the parcel clearly showed a fork to the left of the cliff face, leading into an unnamed rock crevice. They traversed the south slope, leaving the main pilgrimage route behind. About halfway up the slope, the guides discovered a narrow path covered by grass and rocks, with only a faint trail visible. Carlos confirmed. "This is the branch on the map. It's not in the official climbing route system. It was probably erased." The deeper they went, the more suffocating the air became. Tree roots, rock falls blocking the way, clear signs. No one had returned here since 1977. Near the last ridge, they found a section of eroded cliff face, the cracks long dry. But behind it, partially hidden by moss and dirt, was a small, deep hollow, its outer surface neatly stacked with flat rocks, interspersed with rotten wood. Carlos signaled to stop. "This is not natural. The rocks are carefully stacked, in layers, intentionally. Definitely human handiwork." The survey team carefully removed each layer. When the last layer of rock was lifted, a heavy scent wafted out, unclear if it was the smell of death or damp mold. But it made everyone instinctively recoil. In the rock hollow, about 2 meters deep, they found a male skeleton lying on its side, wrapped in an old pastor's robe. A small notebook, rotted, almost broken in half. A leather belt with the initials MS carved into the buckle. Carlos was silent. He opened his phone and immediately called the regional police to report. Maria stood beside him, her hands clasped. She didn't interrupt, nor did she take her eyes off the map open on the table. Her heart pounded not from fear, but from something larger. The truth was drawing near. Preliminary forensic analysis was dispatched that afternoon. The examining doctor provided initial notes. Broken ribs, some abdominal fragments showed signs of strong force trauma, not from falling rocks. No landslide marks surrounded the rock hollow. The earth was hard and dry. The outer layer of rocks was tightly packed, not chaotic. Buried intentionally. Carlos sighed. Not an accident. This is a burial site, done by someone who knew exactly what to hide and where. Maria picked up the rotted notebook, only a few pages not completely disintegrated. Near the last page, the ink was blurred, but a line was still legible. I forgive, but I cannot remain silent before the truth. She couldn't hold it any longer. The first sob escaped her throat, dry and broken, then surged into choking gasps. She clutched the notebook to her chest, wrapped in the tattered old pastor's robe, and collapsed by the edge of the table. Tears streamed. A dam held back for nearly 3 decades finally breaking. There was nothing left to suppress. She wept for Miguel, for Lucia, for 27 years of silence covered by a lie. Her cries echoed through the empty house, unanswered. But this time, it was not the sound of despair, but the sound of someone about to turn everything upside down. Just as everyone was preparing to leave the scene, a member of the survey team called out loudly, "There's something else here." About 5 meters from the rock hollow, in a small crevice sealed with mud, they discovered a small fabric object, damp and rotted, almost disintegrating upon touch. When opened, it was a piece of Catalina doll's hand, muddy, still with a red thread attached at the wrist, the kind Maria used to mend Lucia's toys. At this point, the list of suspects narrowed. Only 2 people survived the 1977 pilgrimage, Padre Diego and Padre Tomas. But they didn't act immediately without sufficient evidence. Carlos contacted the Ouachita National Forest Police, requesting access to security camera footage and entry logs for the conservation area for the past 2 years. Most of the forest area had no recording devices, but a gas station on the outskirts, 12 kilometers from the old entrance, had a camera. In the faint sunlight of the video footage, a man in a gray monk's robe entered, his face blurred by shadow, but the camera clearly recorded. A pair of old, earth-colored canvas leather boots, the kind Diego was noted to have worn when Maria confronted him at the San Jose Monastery. He bought water, a mountain route map, then headed towards Ouachita, the gas station attendant testified. Maria waited no longer. The next morning, she went to San Jose Monastery without an appointment. The Mother Superior simply looked at her, shaking her head. Padre Diego left here 8 months ago. He left no reason, asked no one to see him off. He only left a short letter. I must right an old wrong. Immediately upon receiving the information, Carlos sent an urgent notification through internal police channels. Very quickly, just 2 days later, Diego was found at a private clinic in Ciudad Rodrigo exhausted, without identification, using a false name. 3 days after his arrest, Diego agreed to cooperate with police investigators on the condition that only Carlos and Maria attend the first interrogation. The interrogation room was sealed. Outside, the forensic investigation team was still analyzing the rotted pastoral notebook found in the rock crevice. Inside, Carlos placed the file with photos of the notebook on the table in front of Diego. We have DNA from the handkerchief. We have Miguel's journal. And we have evidence that you returned to bury the bag. Now, we just need you to tell us what you haven't said in 27 years. Diego exhaled for a very long time. Then he began to speak. Miguel knew everything we were doing. For years, the Santa Marta Diocese Charity Fund was just a cover. Money was regularly withdrawn each quarter, transferred to false expense categories, doctrinal protection services, pastoral communication, virtual priest conferences. None of it was real. Carlos flipped through the old expense sheets Maria had collected. They matched perfectly. Miguel didn't know at first, but when he started checking receipts, cross-referencing with the real recipients, he understood everything. Diego continued. He didn't want to report it to the archdiocese. He said, "I will speak before the community. None of them want to live on a lie." He brought his journal up the mountain, said that after the pilgrimage, he would reveal everything. The last night on Peña Santa, they stopped at the western cliff where Maria and Carlos later found Miguel's body. Diego recounted. Miguel fell asleep early. Before that, he was still reading the Bible and writing. Tomas told me, "No one needs his truth." I didn't answer. As I was dozing off, I heard a sound. I turned. Tomas was holding a large stone, blood flowing from Miguel's forehead. Carlos interrupted. "Miguel died right then?" Diego shook his head. "No." He opened his eyes, looked at me, said very softly, "Don't let me be forgotten," then gasped and passed out. Afterward, they buried Miguel's body in the rock crevice, sealing it with stones. Tomas collected Miguel's personal belongings, including the Bible, notebook, and pastor's robe, and put them in a cloth bag. Diego kept the bag for many years, and only returned to bury it when Maria began sending him letters asking about Lucia. "Why did you go back to bury those bags there? Why now?" His voice was weak but clear. "Because she was about to die. I didn't want her to die with nothing to hold on to, and to live forever with the torment of the past." The room was silent for a few seconds. Carlos stared at Diego, his jaw clenched. He said nothing, but his hand on the table subtly curled into a fist. He had heard enough, not because of the confession, but because of the way Diego used the phrase, "hold on to," as if Maria was merely a shadow trailing behind someone else's sin. Carlos stood up, pushing his chair back with a heavy, short scrape. He no longer looked at Diego. He only spoke in a low, hoarse voice. "You can atone, but don't think you have the right to limit the truth." Then he turned and walked straight out, silent but persistent anger in his chest. When Carlos stepped out of the interrogation room, Maria was already standing in the hallway. No one stopped her. She walked into the room, the door closing behind her. Diego remained seated, no longer showing the anger from their first encounter at the monastery. He simply looked straight ahead. Maria stood opposite him. "I'm not asking why Miguel died. I just want to ask, is Lucia still alive?" Diego bowed his head, not answering. Maria pulled the blood-stained handkerchief from her pocket and gently placed it on the table. "You can atone with the truth. Otherwise..." She paused for a beat, her gaze unwavering. "I will find out myself." Diego closed his eyes, his back slightly hunched. "I didn't kill Miguel, but I stood still, and when I turned back, it was too late to save the little girl. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." The next day, Tomas Ibarra was arrested at his home. He offered no resistance, no reaction. The police arrived while he was sitting on his porch, meticulously cleaning a silver teapot, still wearing his old pastor's robe, buttoned to the collar. He stood up, adjusted his sleeves, and nodded slightly to the lead officer, as if stepping into a familiar ritual. He didn't ask why, didn't object, didn't look around as if he had been waiting for this day for a long time. He was charged with 3 counts: murder, disposing of a body, perjury, and obstructing an investigation. At the detention center, his lawyer advised Tomas to remain silent. He complied absolutely. During 3 interrogations, sitting upright, his hands clasped as if in prayer, he spoke only one sentence. Miguel chose truth. I chose peace. No remorse, no trembling. Only a dry, hardened weariness in his voice, like a stone from which all water has been drained. Carlos compiled the file, marking each item his pen strokes decisive, unwavering. When he met Maria again, he placed the file on the table. We have Miguel's body. We have the journal. We have the confession. Maria nodded, her hand still resting on the edge of the file, but her eyes looked distant, not at the papers, but through all the evidence before her. But I don't have my daughter's body. A moment of silence. She continued, her voice steady, firm. And that doesn't mean she's dead. 3 months after Tomas and Diego were arrested, the trial opened at the Provincial Criminal Court in León. The courtroom was packed. Lawyers, journalists, church representatives, all were present. The court rendered its verdict. Tomas Ibarra, convicted of murder, disposing of a body, and obstructing an investigation, sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Diego Calderon, convicted of concealing a crime, destroying evidence, and perjury, sentenced to 22 years in prison due to cooperation with the investigation and pleading guilty. On the same day, the León Diocese Media Office issued a statement. We are saddened by what occurred at Santa Marta Parish in 1977. We take responsibility for the oversight and personnel management during that period. No one apologized to Maria directly, but the statement was printed on the front page of the newspaper for 3 consecutive days. A week later, an official memorial service was held at Santa Marta Church, which had been silent for 27 years. There was no sermon, no presiding priest, only a row of empty chairs where Miguel used to stand. On the altar, 3 items were placed: the rotted Bible with Miguel Serrano's name, the pastoral notebook still stained with blood at the edge, and the piece of Catalina doll's hand placed in a small glass frame. When the organ music faded, Maria stepped forward. No introduction needed. She opened the notebook, finding the last page, the words Miguel wrote before leaving home. I forgive, but the truth must be spoken. No one spoke, no crying. Only light shining through the stained glass window, landing precisely on the 3 items on the altar. And the San Aurelio Children's Choir began to sing, Truth Still Breathes, where there are those who haven't given up. The service ended. People left one by one. Maria remained silent. A moment later, a little girl, about 8 years old, accompanied by her mother from a nearby area, timidly approached. The girl said nothing. She simply placed a colored pencil drawing in Maria's hand. A dark-haired girl standing in a forest, holding hands with a man in a pastor's robe. Neither had faces. Carlos, standing behind, saw everything. He stepped closer, his voice low, asking softly as a final test, "If the girl is dead?" Will you stop?" Maria didn't turn around. She still stood before the temporary altar in the empty room, where Miguel's Bible, the blood-stained pastoral notebook, and the piece of Catalina doll missing a hand were placed. She looked at everything, then reached out to touch the drawing the child had placed there during the memorial, a crude but clear pencil sketch. A little girl standing in a forest, holding hands with a man in a pastor's robe. Her voice was low but firm. "I found my husband, found the truth he wanted to leave behind. Now, it's my daughter's turn." She turned, her eyes meeting Carlos's directly. "Even if there's a 1 in 1,000 chance, I will keep going until there's nothing left to find." One person had returned. The other still hadn't. And Maria was never one to give up easily. In late June, Maria left San Aurelio, taking Miguel's old notebook, the Huachita forest map, and a copy of the colored pencil drawing of the dark-haired girl. She told no one, not even Carlos. He only knew she had left, leaving a note folded into quarters. "If I return, I will bring life with me." Her journey began with names lying dormant in old files. Northern monasteries, nursing homes that had taken in orphan children after unrecorded disasters. Maria visited each place, checking lists, looking through every face in archived photos. None were Lucia, but none also meant there was still a possibility. Finally, one August afternoon, as the wind began to turn dry and hot, she arrived at the small village of Valverde on the edge of the Tormes forest. In the old church, now a community center, Maria saw a wooden board displaying pictures of children adopted in the 80s. In the bottom right corner, a faded photograph. A girl about 7 years old, dark hair standing between two nuns. She stared at the eyes in the photo, deep, large, and with a quiet sadness that was unmistakable. Beneath the picture, a name. Ana Lucia. The center manager, a woman in her 50s with a warm, deep voice, softly asked, "Do you recognize the child in the photo?" Maria replied without hesitation, "That's my daughter." The records confirmed. Ana Lucia was brought in October 1977 with no identification papers, no birth certificate. The person who delivered her was an unknown monk who left a small note. "This girl has no one. Please keep her safe." No one asked further questions. At that time, nameless orphans were not uncommon. But what nearly made Maria collapse was when she saw an attached medical record page, the allergies section, handwritten, "Allergic to cashews." She herself had had to take Lucia to the hospital when she was 3 years old because of it. Ana Lucia was now 47 years old. She was a music teacher in a small town called Sombra del Agua, a 3-hour drive from Valverde. Unmarried, childless, she lived with an old dog named Faro. Her hair was still black, cut short, her eyes as deep as in the photo. And sometimes, in the music she played, there was a strange, ancient melody that anyone who had heard it would instantly recognize as the lullaby Maria used to sing to Lucia to sleep. Maria arrived on a softly rainy afternoon. She carried nothing but an old handkerchief washed clean, but still smelling of faded fabric, and a doll, the remaining Catalina, its hand broken, the red thread still bright at its neck. The girl in the photo was now a grown woman, wearing an earth-tone sweater, her hair neatly clipped, adjusting sheet music on a wooden stand as Maria entered the classroom. They looked at each other for a few seconds. Then Ana Lucia tilted her head, her eyes slightly narrowed as if something very old in her memory was being called forth from the furthest place. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft, polite. Maria didn't answer immediately. She slowly opened her bag, took out the old doll, placed it on the table, and then slowly said, "Do you remember this?" Ana Lucia looked. Her hand stopped on the sheet music, her gaze shifting from curiosity to confusion, then to shock. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came out. "Catalina," she whispered, as if to herself. Then, as if by reflex, she reached out and touched the doll's neck right where the red thread was. She sank into a chair, her eyes wide open, but not blinking, as if a door had just burst open in her mind after decades of being locked. "I once had one just like this. No, I'm sure it's the exact one." Maria stepped closer. She sat down in the opposite chair, took the handkerchief from her bag, folded it into 4, still bearing the old creases. "My little girl once said she'd never forget to bring this, and you kept your word." Neither woman spoke for nearly a minute. Then Ana Lucia stood up. She walked slowly towards the window, turning her back. When she turned back, her eyes were red-rimmed. "Who are you?" Maria inhaled deeply. Her voice was hoarse and broken, but every word was clear. "I am your mother." There was no scream, no outburst, only Ana Lucia stepping forward, her feet stopping right before Maria. She bent down, and like a child who had just been given her true name back, she hugged the woman in front of her, clinging to a memory that had just come back to life. Maria said nothing. She held her daughter tightly, her hands trembling, but her eyes shining brightly, not from joy, but because finally, the loneliness had a form to dissipate into. "I don't remember anything clearly," Ana whispered into her shoulder. "Only sometimes. In my dreams, I smell the forest, and someone holds my hand, running in the mist." "That was your father," Maria said. "He didn't let you disappear. He left every trace for me to find you." Ana Lucia hugged her tighter, tears overflowing from the corners of her eyes. "I don't know if I deserve to be found." Maria placed both hands on her daughter's shoulders, looking straight into her eyes. "You are the part he preserved with his life, and the part I never gave up on." Outside, the rain fell softly. In the small room filled with the scent of old paper and fabric, 2 people embraced the shadows of what they had lost. That day, no one but them knew the reunion had taken place. Only an old film photograph taken by Ana Lucia's student. 2 women, one old, one young, sitting together in the faint golden light of late afternoon. No caption needed. The way their eyes met said it all. Some seeds don't die underground. They just wait long enough to bloom into truth. Perhaps you too have kept silent, not because you had nothing to say, but because you feared that if you spoke, everything would shatter. Perhaps you too have tried to forget someone, a memory, or a question no one answered for years. If you've read this far, you must understand. Maria's journey isn't just about finding her husband and daughter after 27 years of being missing. It's also the journey of anyone who has been forced to forget, led astray, or left behind because the truth was too heavy for someone to admit. We tell this story based on many forgotten incidents found in old files, in places once buried by promises of peace. Names, details, and locations have been changed to protect identities and preserve something more precious: empathy. The goal is not to rehash the past, but to help someone quietly going through pain know that they are not alone. And sometimes, just one silence listened to in the right way is enough to change a whole life. If this story touched a part of you, please share it through a message, an email, or just a sentence to the person you think needs it most. Who knows? Somewhere there might be a mother still searching for her child, a child still waiting to be called by their true name, a word unspoken still holding its value. Tell this story again, so that some truths will never be buried again.